So, if England are the favourites to win Euro 2024, who are the main candidates to stop them doing it? Now, if any other team have the right to call themselves favourites going into this tournament, it's got to be France. They have that right in every tournament just because they have just an incredible set of talent to call upon. There are probably 50 players who could say that they're good enough to be in a European Championship winning squad. Didier Deschamps is going to have to trim that down to 26 somehow. Now, of course, the one surety is that Kylian Mbappe, this guy, will be leading the way as captain and major goal scorer. Another incredibly prolific season, and captain for PSG this season as well. So the leadership side comes more and more naturally to him, as well as the goal scoring. Now, I think if we're looking at France's forward players, we know that we're in an absolute golden age for that, because at the moment, if you look at it, 3 of their top 4 goal scorers of all time, Mbappe, Olivier Giroud, who's just getting ready for his swan song in European football before going off to the MLS with Los Angeles FC, and Antoine Griezmann are in there, the odd one out being the retired Thierry Henry. And at some stage, Mbappe is going to take over Giroud, even though it's taken him forever to get there to the top of French goal scorers of all time. Probably not in this tournament because he's 13 behind going into the Euro 2024. But it just shows you how many threats they've got, and the fact that they're having to use Griezmann in midfield, where he's been brilliant over the last couple of years, of course, shows that they do have threats all the way over the pitch. Now, the major concern for France is their problems are quite similar to England's problems, actually, in that they have a few key players out of form in key positions, notably at centre-back, where Raphael Varane has faded from the picture, and Dayot Upamecano, who's really trusted by Didier Deschamps, and has always struggled a little bit with consistency. The bottom has fallen out of his form in the last 6 to 8 months for Bayern, and he's even been ousted from the first team at Bayern in the last couple of months by Eric Dyer. So for them to decide on some sort of defensive leadership, I guess a lot of Premier League fans are sitting there right now thinking, well, the obvious answer is William Saliba. It would be a real departure if he got into the 11, having not been tested there much going into the tournament, and that would be a little bit of a risk. But these are decisions that Didier Deschamps has got to make, and of course not defending correctly is something that could lose you the tournament no matter how much talent you've got. Now, while we're talking about threats to win this title, what about Portugal? Why not Portugal? Of course, champions in 2016, and let's face it, they're a lot better team now than they were then, even though talent and effectiveness are perhaps two separate things. Of course, one of the key things for them is they're not as reliant on Cristiano Ronaldo as they used to be. He's nice to have, but not everything has to flow through him anymore. You have other leaders in the team as well as other goal scorers. So you could say their best player was Bernardo Silva. You could say it was Bruno Fernandes, even though he's had a difficult season for Manchester United. Same for Rafael Leao, who's not been the same player who won Serie A MVP going back a little bit, but is still a match winner on his day. How do they fit them all into the same team? Well, that's a problem for Roberto Martinez to deal with. But even though people have mixed opinions about Martinez in England, he's perhaps their secret weapon if they're really going to win this tournament. He's changed the way that Portugal have played over the last little while. And there are a few reasons behind this. Of course, the fact that they won all 10 of their games in qualifying shows that he's really taken to Portugal and they've really taken to him. But they play slightly more bold, slightly more exciting football. He's always been a little bit better tactically than people have given him credit for. And I think if you go back to the 2018 World Cup and look at the number they did on Belgium in the quarterfinals with Romelu Lukaku put out to the right wing, shows that he has a different way of seeing the game sometimes, especially when he's got brilliant players to work with as he has at the moment. The other thing is he really understands the needs of his players. I think you go back to the last international break where he picked a different team for both of the two friendlies that they were playing. Shows that he understands what it's like to be a player, what it's like to feel tired at this stage in the season. And to have someone that understands your needs as an elite player, I think is really vital in gaining their confidence. There's a brilliant atmosphere around Portugal. I think they're a serious contender for this tournament. Now, if we're talking about favourites, we've got to talk about Germany, right? For two reasons. One, because they're the hosts, and two, because it's Germany at a tournament, right? Well, not quite. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. really, we're looking at Germany winning the European Championship. We're going back more than a generation. Of course, they've won the World Cup since in 2014, but the last time they won the Euros was in 1996. Okay, it was that one in England, so I won't talk about that too much. But it shows that Germany have been a declining force, and particularly a declining force since they won the World Cup in 2014. A couple of really poor major tournament displays, not least the one in Euro 2020, when they looked really short of ideas under Jogi Löw. Bringing in Hansi Flick didn't work for them either. So for them, it's all about reviving the feeling behind their national team, because people in Germany feel a little bit downcast about the prospects of their team and have done for a couple of years. And there wasn't even that much public interest in the 2022 World Cup, partly because it was in Qatar, but also because Germans just don't feel good about their national team at the moment. And you didn't even have the games shown on big screens in most of the major cities like Munich, Berlin and Köln. Now, of course, it's slightly different this time for a couple of reasons. And firstly, is because Julian Nagelsmann has come in. He's bright, he's got loads of different ideas, and they've had a couple of good results against big nations recently, like the wins over the Dutch and the French, for example, which are really, really important to them. But it's also the fact that because their club teams have been doing well in Europe, and you look at Leverkusen and their brilliant season, Bayern getting to the semi-finals of the Champions League, Dortmund getting all the way to the final. You can pick out some of those players and think, okay, well maybe this is a tournament where, like the World Cup in 2006, they could use it as a moment where they regenerate that national feeling of feeling good about their football and feeling good about their national team. Those young players who could pull them through, you look at Florian Wirtz, you look at Nicholas Füllkrug, who's a little bit older, but someone who's got the impression of being a tournament talisman, which he almost was at World Cup 2022, where he just played a little cameo, scored that brilliant equaliser against Spain at Al Bayt to get them a draw in the group, even though it wasn't enough to go through in the end. So there is an opportunity with Nagelsmann and his young Germany side to create something a little bit fresh in this tournament. Now, Spain are the last one of our big four who can maybe threaten England to become tournament champions. And of course, tournament champions quite recently, twice in 2008 and 2012. But the question is, do they really belong in this group? Well, I guess I'll leave that up to you. Of course, they had their moments in the last Euros before they failed to even get out of the group at World Cup 2022. So what sort of Spain are we really looking at? I think on different days you could have different answers to that. I think what's clear going into this tournament is in Luis de la Fuente, they have a coach who's not as good as they had for the last couple of tournaments in Luis Enrique, who really has a firm identity. De la Fuente is someone who was like a safe pair of hands because he looked after the under-21 team before. He knows a lot of these players, and of course they're trying to bring through younger players. But of course it feels for that reason that they're kind of stuck between two stools. They have experienced players like Alvaro Morata who are great on their day, but perhaps not at the level of the greats of 2008 and 2012. And younger players like Pedri, who's played so much before, like Pau Cubarsí of Barcelona, only 17 years old, and can almost be a playmaker from that centre-back position. He could be an absolute star for them in the future. Barcelona has just signed him to a big new contract, of course, as they try and build with him. One of those other mainstays from the Barcelona clique, Gavi, won't be available because he did his cruciate knee ligament going back into autumn, so he'll be really missed as well. So even though they have one of the best midfielders in the world in Rodri, we're sort of picking out odd players who we think could make an impact rather than a plan, a system, an idea of what we're definitely going to get from them. So we're talking about a relatively condensed tournament compared to the World Cup, so maybe Spain could put together a system of performances, a series of performances and results that could get them into the spot. I just wonder if they could still lack that sort of consistency necessary to win a tournament, even a relatively short form tournament like this one. So what about the best of the rest? Well, it might seem a little sacrilegious putting Italy in this category. They are the defending champions after all. But they've been through such an incredible, bizarre journey over the last couple of tournaments. Of course, failed to qualify for 2 successive World Cups and really made heavy weather of qualifying for this tournament as well. Kept us going right until the end, getting that draw with Ukraine in Leverkusen to see themselves through in the end. But you know what? They have changed so much over the last little while. I think you look at the fact they've got a different coach, having done so well under Roberto Mancini, in Luciano Spalletti, someone who also wants to play pretty football. But they're in a transitional spot at the moment. You know, they have a couple of mainstays, and particularly that midfield. I mean, they've managed to move on from Marco Verratti very well with Nicolo Barella, having had a brilliant season for Inter and more than capable of orienting the game for them going forward. But I think you look at both ends. The fact that Gigi Donnarumma has had an up and down season for PSG, to say the least, and Gianluca Scamacca, there's great clamour for him to lead the line in Italy, but he's only started to come into form for Atalanta over the last couple of months, so we're not 100% sure of what we're really going to get from Italy. Now the Netherlands, if only they had a time machine. I think you look at sliding doors moments, and if Euro 2020 had happened when it was meant to happen, the Netherlands would have really been a contender. They looked absolutely brilliant under Ronald Koeman. But of course it got postponed a year because of COVID. Koeman took the opportunity of a lifetime to move on to Barcelona, and things changed a little bit. Now of course Koeman's back there where he belongs, at the helm of the Dutch national team now, but they're not quite the team they used to be. Again, sort of between two stools like Italy, in that they have some of those really experienced players like Virgil van Dijk. Memphis perhaps not quite at the level he was a couple of years ago, having been held back by injuries and whatnot. They do have some key players who could really make a huge impression in this tournament. You look at Donyell Malen, who's been in great nick for Dortmund this season, and another Bundesliga-based player, Xavi Simons, who on his day is really one of the best midfield players in Europe. But again, we can't be quite sure of what we're going to get from the Netherlands. The other ones we have to look for are Belgium. Now, there's this narrative that they're an ageing team, and of course that's true to a certain extent. And Romelu Lukaku has again had a few peaks and troughs this season at Roma. Along with their form, his has been up and down. But I wonder if the fact that Kevin De Bruyne has missed quite a lot of this season through injury maybe helps him. Maybe he'll be a little bit fresher than some of the other star names at this tournament. And of course, we have to look at the fact that Belgium are regenerating, and they're doing it quite well. You look at Arthur Theat at the back, who's done well for Rennes, and I would expect will turn up in the Premier League at some point. Arthur Vermeeren in midfield, if he gets a little go, really industrious midfielder who's already impressed in the Champions League. And of course, Jeremy Doku, who has turned from potential to brilliant player under Pep Guardiola. And the fact that Belgium are moving in the right direction, you look at the fact they've won all their qualifying games, and the fact that the Belgian FA have awarded a contract extension already to Domenico Tedesco. So even if this isn't the tournament they're going to win, they feel that there's the prospect of them moving in the right direction under Tedesco and getting better and better with this new team. So whereas England can go into Euro 2024 with confidence, plenty for them to think about, though you suspect that France and Portugal will be the real ones to watch. Next up, I'll be casting my eye over Scotland's hopes in Germany this summer.